Tonight, we're traveling not to marble temples or golden palaces, but to quiet moments where gods learned what it meant to love. You'll drift through the most beautiful romances ever whispered in ancient Greece. From Aphrodite rising from ocean foam to Zeus discovering that even shape-shifting couldn't prepare him for love's gentle transformation. These are stories born from starlight, jealousy, and devotion. Tales where immortal hearts proved just as fragile and fierce as mortal ones. If these ancient love stories help you find rest, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. And share in the comments what time it is where you're listening. There's something beautifully comforting knowing others are drifting to sleep with these same timeless hearts. And let's begin. The awakening of the gods in the golden mists of ancient time. When gods walked among the clouds of Mount Olympus and their hearts pulsed with the same passions that move mortals, the world existed in perfect order, yet incomplete harmony. The immortals ruled their domains with absolute power. Zeus commanded thunder that could split mountains. Poseidon controlled seas that could swallow entire civilizations, and Hades governed the realm of souls with unwavering justice. Yet for all their might, something essential was missing from their eternal existence. The gods lived in marble palaces that gleamed like captured starlight, surrounded by gardens where ambrosia flowers bloomed in perpetual spring. They feasted on nectar that tasted of liquid sunshine and spoke in voices that could make mortals weep with their beauty. But their hearts remained as cold and distant as winter stars, untouched by the gentle fire that would soon transform everything they thought they knew about power and purpose. In those days, before love had a name, the immortals moved through their daily rituals with mechanical precision. They answered prayers, controlled the weather, and maintained the delicate balance between order and chaos. But there was no warmth in their interactions, no tenderness in their glances, no longing that made their immortal hearts race with anticipation. They were perfect beings, living perfect lives. Yet, something indefinable was absent from their perfection. The mortal world below reflected this emotional emptiness. Humans went about their lives with the same mechanical precision as their gods. They married for alliance, bore children for legacy, and loved with careful restraint. Passion was unknown. Romance was a foreign concept. And the idea that two souls could become one seemed as impossible as mortals growing wings and flying to the heavens. But the universe has a way of correcting its own imbalances, and change was stirring in the depths of the Mediterranean Sea, in waters that had remained unchanged since the world's creation. Something miraculous was beginning to form. The sea foam gathered and swirled with purpose, catching the first light of dawn like scattered pearls. The waves themselves seemed to hold their breath, as if the ocean knew it was about to give birth to a force that would transform not just the gods, but the very nature of existence itself. Ancient prophecies had whispered of this moment, though none understood their meaning until it came to pass. The fates had woven this thread into the tapestry of destiny from the very beginning, knowing that without love, even immortal perfection was merely beautiful emptiness. The time had come for hearts to awaken, for souls to recognize their other halves, and for the gods to discover that true power lay not in commanding others, but in surrendering to something greater than themselves. Aphrodite, born from foam, from the crystalline waters of the Mediterranean Sea, where waves gently kiss the shores of Cyprus, emerged the most beautiful of all goddesses. The morning Aphrodite was born. The sea sang a melody it had been composing for eternity, a song so pure that dolphins wept tears of joy, and even the wind fell silent to listen. She rose from the foam like dawn itself, her golden hair catching sunlight that seemed to emanate from within her rather than from the sky above. The water clung to her skin like liquid diamonds, reluctant to release the goddess it had nurtured in its depths. Each droplet that fell from her perfect form became a pearl, and the shells that witnessed her birth would forever after be considered sacred, treasured by lovers who understood their connection to love's first moment. Her first breath filled the air with the scent of roses that had never bloomed before, flowers that would become her eternal symbol. Zephyrus, the gentle west wind, was the first to greet her. He had been wandering aimlessly across the waters when he felt a pull unlike anything in his eternal existence, an invisible thread that drew him toward something he had never known he was searching for. Following that golden cord of destiny, he found her standing on a shell that had grown large enough to cradle her divine form. Her beauty so radiant it made the sunrise seem pale by comparison. Without words, for no language yet existed that could capture what he witnessed, Zephyrus understood his purpose. His breath became a caress that lifted her hair like spun gold and carried her toward the sacred shore of Cyprus. As they traveled across the water, the very sea transformed beneath them. Dolphins appeared from the depths, their sleek bodies arcing through the waves in celebration. Schools of fish swam in perfect formations beneath her shell, their scales catching the light and creating patterns that looked like underwater constellations. The sea nymphs emerged from their coral palaces to witness this miracle. These daughters of the ocean, who had lived for countless ages in their own ethereal beauty, Yet Aphrodite's presence did not diminish their loveliness. Instead, it enhanced everything around her, as if her very existence made the world more beautiful, more alive, more worthy of love. When her shell finally touched the shore of Cyprus, the sand beneath it turned to the finest powder, soft as silk and warm as a lover's touch. The first flowers to bloom at her feet were roses, their petals the color of dawn and sunset combined. Their thorns not meant to harm, but to remind all who would pick them that love, while beautiful, required courage and care to hold. The island itself seemed to exhale in contentment as Aphrodite stepped onto dry land for the first time. Ancient olive trees bent their branches toward her in greeting, their leaves rustling with what sounded almost like whispered prayers of welcome. Eros and Psyche, the soul's awakening. In a distant land, there lived a princess whose beauty rivaled that of Aphrodite herself. Psyche, whose name means soul, was destined for a journey that would forever change the nature of love. She was the youngest of 3 daughters born to a king who had been blessed with more beauty in his family than seemed possible for mortals to possess. Yet while her sisters were lovely in conventional ways, Psyche possessed something that transcended mere physical perfection. Her beauty seemed to glow from within, as if her soul itself was visible through her mortal form. Word of her extraordinary appearance spread like ripples across still water, reaching every corner of the known world. Travelers journeyed for months just to glimpse her face, and poets wept because no words in any language could adequately capture what they saw. People began to whisper that surely she must be Aphrodite herself, walking among mortals in disguise. This worship of a mortal girl reached the ears of Aphrodite in her temple on Mount Olympus, and for the first time since her birth from sea foam, jealousy was a new emotion for her, burning like poison in her divine veins. How dare mortals compare their fleeting beauty to her eternal perfection? How dare they offer to a human girl the devotion that belonged to the goddess of love herself? In her anger, Aphrodite summoned her son, Eros, the young god whose arrows could inspire love or indifference with equal precision. His wings were iridescent like those of a butterfly, delicate yet powerful enough to carry him across any distance in the blink of an eye. She commanded him to fly to Psyche and shoot her with an arrow that would make her fall desperately in love with the most hideous creature he could find. Eros took up his golden bow and his quiver of arrows, some tipped with gold to inspire love, others with lead to create indifference. He flew swiftly to the kingdom where Psyche lived, invisible to mortal eyes, ready to carry out his mother's vengeful command. But as he hovered above the garden where the princess walked among her flowers, something unexpected happened that would change the course of destiny itself. Psyche looked up at that moment, perhaps sensing a presence she could not see, and her eyes met his across the invisible barrier between mortal and divine. In that instant, Eros felt one of his own arrows pierce his heart, though he had not fired it. Love struck him like lightning, sudden and overwhelming, and he understood for the first time why mortals spoke of love as both blessing and curse. The planned revenge became impossible. Instead of destroying her with monstrous love, Eros found himself planning something far more complex. He would make her his bride, but in a way that would protect her from his mother's wrath, while allowing their love to grow in secret. Persephone and the first encounter. In the flowering fields of Sicily, where young Persephone gathered Narcissus with her companions, Destiny was preparing an encounter that would change the seasons forever. She was the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and her laughter was like the sound of silver bells carried on a gentle breeze. Wherever she walked, flowers bloomed more brightly, and the very air seemed to shimmer with a promise of eternal spring. Persephone had wandered farther from her companions than usual on this particular morning, drawn by a patch of narcissus flowers that seemed to glow with their own inner light. These were no ordinary flowers, though she did not know it. They had been planted there by Zeus himself at the request of his brother Hades, who had been watching the young goddess from his dark realm below and had fallen deeply in love with her radiant spirit. Hades, lord of the underworld, was not the evil figure that mortals often imagined, but he was profoundly lonely. His kingdom was vast and rich beyond measure, filled with precious gems that sparkled like captured stars and rivers of liquid silver that sang as they flowed. Yet, it lacked the warmth of living things, the joy of laughter, the simple pleasure of watching flowers bloom in sunlight. He had observed Persephone through cracks in the earth, seeing how she brought life and happiness wherever she went, and his heart had awakened to a longing he had never known before. As Persephone bent to pick the largest narcissus, its petals white as fresh snow and its center golden as concentrated sunlight, the earth beneath her feet began to tremble with a deep, resonant vibration. The flower's roots went deeper than any mortal plant, reaching down into the very foundations of the world, connecting the realm of the living with the kingdom of the dead. When she grasped its stem, she unknowingly pulled at the threads that held the barrier between worlds in place. The ground split open with a sound like thunder, but deeper and more musical. as if the earth itself was singing a song of transformation. From that chasm rose a chariot pulled by 4 magnificent black horses whose eyes gleamed like stars in the darkness. Their hooves struck sparks from the air itself, and their manes flowed like liquid night, beautiful and terrible in their otherworldly grace. Driving the chariot was Hades, no longer the pale, grim figure of a mortal imagination, but revealed in his true form as a god of terrible beauty and infinite depth. His dark eyes held the wisdom of ages and the sadness of one who had seen every soul that ever lived pass through his realm. When he reached down and lifted Persephone into his chariot, his hands were surprisingly gentle, and she found herself looking into those ancient eyes without fear. Something in his gaze spoke to her of mysteries she had never imagined, of depths that called to a part of her soul she had never known existed. As they descended into the earth together, she looked back once at the world of sunlight and flowers, not knowing that her departure would drain all warmth from the world above, creating the first winter as her mother Demeter searched desperately for her lost daughter. Aphrodite and Ares, the fire of war and love. In the smoking forge of Hephaestus, where metal bent to intense heat and sparks flew like fallen stars. 2 divine hearts were about to discover a passion that would burn hotter than any flame ever kindled. The marriage of Aphrodite to the god of fire and metalwork had been arranged by Zeus himself. A political union meant to bring stability to Olympus. Yet love, as the gods would learn, cannot be forged like metal or commanded like thunder. Hephaestus was not ugly, as mortals often imagined, but he was different from the other gods. His hands were scarred from working with divine fire, his movements careful and deliberate rather than graceful and flowing. He loved his beautiful wife with a devotion that was pure and complete, crafting for her jewelry that captured the light of stars and mirrors that reflected not just her image, but her very essence. Yet Aphrodite's heart remained untouched by his gentle affection, yearning for something she could not name. The day Ares first entered the forge changed everything. The god of war had come seeking new armor, his bronze breastplate dented from recent battles, his sword dulled from combat. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, his dark eyes holding the intensity of a storm about to break. When he looked at Aphrodite, she felt something ignite within her that she had never experienced before, a heat that had nothing to do with the forge fires surrounding them. Ares was everything Hephaestus was not. Where her husband was careful and methodical, Ares was impulsive and passionate. Where Hephaestus created, Ares destroyed. Where her husband spoke, in measured tones about beauty and craftsmanship. Ares communicated with glances that set her immortal blood racing through her veins like liquid fire. The attraction between them was immediate and overwhelming, a force of nature that neither could resist. Their first stolen moment came when Hephaestus was called away to Olympus on urgent business. Ares had returned to the forge, ostensibly to check on his armor's progress. But his true purpose was written in the way his eyes sought hers across the smoky chamber. Without words, they came together like opposing forces of nature. War and love, discovering they were not enemies, but complementary powers that created something entirely new when combined. Their secret meetings became a dance of desire and danger. They would meet in hidden groves where no other gods ventured, in underwater caves where only the sea nymphs might glimpse them, in the spaces between day and night where time itself seemed to pause. Each encounter deepened their connection, and from their union came children who embodied different aspects of their combined natures. Eros, the god of passionate love, inherited his mother's beauty and his father's intensity. Anteros represented love returned, while Deimos and Phobos, fear and panic, showed the darker sides of both war and passion. But secrets among the gods are difficult to keep, especially when the secret keeper is married to the master craftsman of Olympus. Hephaestus began to notice subtle changes in his wife, the way her eyes would grow distant during their conversations, how she would disappear for hours without explanation. His suspicions grew like shadows at sunset, and his love transformed into something harder and more determined. Working through long nights in his forge, Hephaestus crafted a net so fine it was nearly invisible, yet stronger than any chain ever forged. He wove into it not just divine metals, but his own heartbreak, his betrayal, and his desire for truth. When he was finished, he had created a trap that would reveal everything while ensuring that all of Olympus would witness his humiliation and theirs. Zeus and his transformations, the power of desire. Europa and the white bull, in the verdant meadows of Phoenicia, where flowers bloomed in colors that had no names, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with possibility. A princess with eyes like stars played among the blossoms, unaware that the king of the gods himself was watching her. Europa was the daughter of King Agenor, blessed with beauty that seemed to capture the very essence of youth and joy. Her laughter rang across the fields like music, and wherever she walked, the flowers seemed to turn their faces toward her as if she were their personal sun. Zeus had been observing her for days from his throne on Olympus, his divine heart stirred by something he had rarely felt before. This was not the casual desire that had driven his previous affairs, but something deeper and more transformative. Europa's innocence and natural grace touched something in the king of the gods that he had thought lost forever. A capacity for wonder and genuine affection that his immortal responsibilities had nearly extinguished. Knowing that his true form would terrify any mortal, Zeus chose to approach her as a magnificent white bull, an animal sacred to his power, yet gentle enough not to frighten her. His transformation was a masterwork of divine artistry. His hide was pure white, softer than the finest silk, and his eyes held depths of kindness that spoke of intelligence far beyond any earthly creature. Golden horns curved gracefully from his head, and his breath carried the scent of spring meadows and distant oceans. Europa discovered him grazing peacefully among her father's cattle, and something about his presence drew her like a magnet. There was no fear in her approach, only curiosity and delight at finding such a beautiful creature. She spoke to him in gentle tones, offering him flowers from her garland. And when he knelt before her in obvious invitation, she climbed onto his back with the trust of one who had never known betrayal. The moment she settled onto his back, Zeus began to move toward the sea with smooth flowing steps that felt more like floating than walking. Europa felt no alarm, only wonder at the magical nature of her ride. As they reached the shore, the bull stepped into the waves without hesitation, and she gasped in amazement as the water supported them as if it were solid ground. They moved across the Mediterranean like a dream, dolphins racing alongside them in joyful escort, while sea nymphs emerged from the depths to witness this unprecedented journey. When they reached the shores of Crete, Zeus revealed his true identity, and Europa understood that she had been chosen for something far greater than her mortal life had prepared her for. Their union produced 3 sons who would become legendary rulers: Minos, who would govern Crete with wisdom and justice; Rhadamanthus, who would become a judge of the dead; and Sarpedon, who would lead the Lycians with courage and honor. Leda and the Swan. In the serene waters of a Spartan lake, where swans glided like white dreams across the mirror's smooth surface, Zeus found a new form to express his love. Queen Leda of Sparta possessed a beauty that was both regal and natural, combining the dignity of her royal position with an earthiness that spoke of genuine connection to the natural world. She often came to the lake in the early morning hours, when mist rose from the water like the breath of sleeping gods. Zeus approached her as a swan of extraordinary beauty, his feathers pure white and luminous, his neck curved in perfect grace. The transformation allowed him to court her with a gentleness that his divine form could never achieve. gliding beside her as she walked along the shore, creating ripples that caught the morning light like scattered diamonds. Their encounter was poetry made manifest, a dance of attraction that unfolded with the rhythm of waves against the shore. From their union came the most famous children in all of mythology, born from mystical eggs that held within them the power to change the course of history. Helen, whose beauty would launch 1,000 ships and bring about the Trojan War, and the twin brothers, Castor and Pollux, the Dioscuri, who would become protectors of sailors and symbols of brotherly devotion. Danae and the Golden Rain in the highest tower of Argos, where a princess lived prisoner to a prophecy. Love found a way through the most solid stones. King Acrisius had received a prophecy that his daughter, Danae, would bear a son who would kill him, and in his fear, he had imprisoned her in a tower of bronze, believing that isolation would prevent the prophecy's fulfillment. But Zeus, moved by her plight and captivated by her beauty, found a way that no mortal prison could prevent. He transformed himself into a shower of golden rain, droplets of liquid light that found their way through the smallest cracks in her bronze prison. The rain fell gently upon Danae like a blessing, each drop carrying within it the essence of divine love and the promise of freedom. From this miraculous union was born Perseus, who would indeed fulfill the prophecy, but in a way that brought honor rather than shame, becoming one of the greatest heroes in all of Greek mythology. The golden rain became a symbol of love's ability to transcend any barrier, to find a way where none seemed possible. Apollo and Daphne, the eternal pursuit, in the forests of Thessaly, where ancient trees whispered secrets older than memory, and sunlight filtered through leaves like liquid gold. The god of music was about to discover that not all melodies end in harmony. Apollo, radiant son of Zeus, had always been confident in his power and beauty. His lyre could make stones weep, and his arrows never missed their mark. He was the god of light, music, poetry, and prophecy, beloved by mortals and immortals alike for his golden beauty and artistic gifts. But pride, as the fates well knew, often comes before the most devastating falls. On this particular day, Apollo encountered young Eros practicing with his bow in a secluded grove. The sight of the child god struggling with arrows that seemed too large for his small hands amused Apollo, and he could not resist mocking the boy's efforts. "Child," Apollo said with condescending laughter, "leave the bow and arrows to those who know how to use them. Your toys are meant for kindling flames of love, not for real marksmanship. See how my arrows fly true and strike down the mighty python. What victories can your little darts claim?" Eros looked up at the golden god with eyes that held depths far beyond his apparent youth. "Your arrows may strike monsters, Apollo," he replied with quiet dignity, "but mine strike gods. And since you think so little of my power, let me show you just how mighty these toys can be." From his quiver, Eros drew 2 arrows of very different natures. The first was tipped with gold and designed to inspire the most passionate love, a desire so intense it would consume all rational thought. The second was tipped with lead and crafted to create complete indifference, even revulsion toward romantic advances. With the precision that Apollo had mocked, Eros fired the golden arrow straight into the sun god's heart. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. Apollo felt as if liquid fire had replaced the blood in his veins. But this was not the comfortable warmth of his solar nature. This was something wild and desperate, a need that made his immortal hands tremble and his throat voice catch in his throat. He looked around frantically, seeking the source of this sudden, inexplicable longing, and his eyes fell upon a figure moving through the trees like a woodland spirit made manifest. Daphne, daughter of the river god Penis, was everything that embodied the wild beauty of untamed nature. Her hair flowed like dark water. Her movements had the grace of a deer, and her eyes held the freedom of one who had never been caged by convention or expectation. She was a devoted follower of Artemis, having sworn an oath of eternal chastity, preferring the company of trees and streams to that of any suitor. At the moment Apollo's gaze found her, Eros fired his second arrow, the one tipped with lead, straight into Daphne's heart. Where Apollo felt overwhelming attraction, she felt immediate and instinctive revulsion. The sight of the golden god approaching her with obvious romantic intent filled her with a terror that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with a fundamental rejection of what he represented. Apollo called out to her with words of love and praise, his voice carrying all the musical beauty that had charmed countless others. "Beautiful nymph, do not flee from me. I am not your enemy. I am Apollo, son of Zeus, god of music and light. My love for you burns brighter than the sun itself. Stay and let me tell you of the wonders I can show you, the songs I will compose in your honor." But his words only increased her determination to escape. Daphne ran through the forest with the speed of wind through leaves, her feet barely touching the ground as she leaped over fallen logs and dodged between ancient tree trunks. Behind her, Apollo pursued with the relentless intensity of sunrise, his golden hair streaming behind him, his divine nature allowing him to match her supernatural speed. The chase continued through groves and glades, across streams and up hillsides, neither gaining nor losing ground. Apollo's pleas grew more desperate as he ran, promising her everything he could offer: immortality, a place among the gods, temples in her honor, eternal youth and beauty. But Daphne heard only the sound of her own heart beating like a trapped bird and her father's river calling to her from somewhere ahead. As her strength began to fail and Apollo drew closer, Daphne reached the banks of her father's river and cried out in desperation, "Father, help me. If you have any power, change this form that has brought me nothing but unwanted pursuit. Destroy this beauty that has become my curse." Peneus heard his daughter's plea and responded with the swift action of flowing water. Even as Apollo reached out to embrace her, Daphne felt her feet growing heavy and rooting into the earth. Her arms stretched upward and outward, becoming branches that reached toward the sky. Her skin roughened into bark, her hair transformed into leaves that rustled with her final breath as a mortal being. Apollo's arms closed around not the warm flesh of his beloved, but the smooth bark of a laurel tree. He pressed his face against the trunk and felt, to his amazement, a heartbeat still pulsing within the wood. "Since you cannot be my wife," he whispered to the tree, "you will be my sacred plant. Your leaves will crown the heads of heroes and poets. You will be the symbol of victory and honor. And through you, my love will be remembered forever." The wrath of Hera, subtle vengeances. In the golden halls of Olympus, where gods lived in apparent harmony beneath marble columns that gleamed like captured starlight, a divine wife wove silent vengeances, transforming love into lessons that would echo through eternity. Hera, queen of the gods and goddess of marriage, had learned that direct confrontation with her husband Zeus brought only temporary satisfaction. Instead, she had developed a more sophisticated approach to justice, one that targeted not the unfaithful god himself, but those mortal women who had captured his wandering attention. Her methods were elegant in their cruelty, transformations that served as both punishment and protection, ensuring that Zeus's lovers would never again pose a threat to her divine marriage, while simultaneously creating living monuments to their transgression. Each metamorphosis was carefully crafted, designed to fit the specific nature of the offense and the character of the woman involved. Io had been a priestess in Hera's own temple, a position of trust that made her affair with Zeus particularly galling to the goddess. When Hera discovered their liaison, she did not rage or storm. Instead, she smiled with the cold beauty of winter moonlight and began to weave her spell. Io found herself transformed into a white heifer, beautiful still, but trapped in a form that could never again attract divine attention. But Hera's punishment did not end with transformation. She sent a gadfly, a creature of relentless persistence, to torment the cow that had once been Io. Day and night, the insect pursued her across the known world, its sting driving her to madness as she wandered from land to land, seeking relief that never came. Through Greece, she ran across the sea that would bear her name, the Ionian, into Egypt, where she would finally find peace and restoration to human form. But the journey took years, and every step was a reminder of the price of attracting a god's love. Callisto's story carried different notes of tragedy. She had been one of Artemis's most devoted followers, a huntress who had sworn an oath of eternal chastity to serve the virgin goddess. Her beauty was wild and untamed, like a deer that had never known captivity. And it was this very wildness that attracted Zeus's attention. He came to her disguised as Artemis herself, exploiting her trust and devotion to achieve his desires. When Callisto's pregnancy could no longer be hidden, Artemis discovered the deception and flew into a rage that shook the very foundations of the forest. She banished Callisto from her sacred band, stripping her of the protection and purpose that had defined her entire existence. But Hera was not finished with her rival. At the moment of the child's birth, she transformed Callisto into a bear, condemning her to wander the wilderness in a form that her own son might one day hunt. The cruelest touch came years later, when that son, Arcas, grown into a skilled hunter, encountered a bear in the forest that seemed strangely familiar. The bear was his mother, and she recognized him, even in her transformed state. Approaching with desperate love rather than animal caution, Arcas raised his spear, not recognizing the maternal devotion in the creature's eyes. And only Zeus's intervention prevented the ultimate tragedy, transforming both mother and son into constellations where they could be together for eternity. Semele's fate was perhaps the most elaborate of Hera's vengeances, a masterpiece of psychological manipulation that used the victim's own desires against her. The young princess of Thebes had caught Zeus's eye, and their affair had produced a pregnancy that would result in the birth of Dionysus. But Hera appeared to Semele, disguised as an old woman, a trusted servant who had cared for the royal family for generations. In this guise, she planted seeds of doubt in Semele's mind. "If he truly loves you," the disguised goddess whispered, "why does he not appear to you in his true form as he does to his wife, Hera? Surely you deserve to see the full glory of the king of the gods." The suggestion took root and grew, fed by Semele's natural curiosity and her desire to be treated as an equal to the goddess who was her rival. When Semele finally made her request, Zeus knew it would destroy her, but he had sworn by the river Styx to grant her any wish and even the king of the gods could not break such an oath. He appeared to her in his true form, with all the lightning and thunder that was his divine nature. And Semele was consumed instantly by the very glory she had sought to witness. Adonis and the Red Anemones. In the perfumed gardens of Cyprus, where Aphrodite cultivated the most beautiful flowers ever to bloom under divine care, there flourished a love that was destined to wither like petals in the autumn wind. The story of Adonis began not with birth, but with transformation. Hera, a princess of Cyprus, had been cursed by Aphrodite herself for failing to honor the goddess properly. The curse was cruel in its precision. Hera would fall desperately in love with her own father, King Zeus. Driven mad by this unnatural passion, she tricked her father into lying with her during a festival when wine flowed freely and identities were hidden by darkness and celebration. When Eros discovered the deception, his rage was terrible to behold. He pursued his daughter with a sword, intent on killing her to cleanse the stain of their union. But the gods, perhaps moved by pity for a girl who had been victim to divine punishment, transformed Hera into a myrrh tree just as her father's blade was about to fall. The sword struck bark instead of flesh, and from the wound in the tree's trunk, tears of fragrant resin began to flow. 10 months later, the tree split open, and from within emerged a baby of such extraordinary beauty that even the woodland nymphs gasped in wonder. This was Adonis, born from sorrow and transformation, carrying within his mortal form a beauty that seemed to capture the very essence of youth and vitality. Aphrodite, happening upon the scene, felt her heart stir with emotions she had never experienced before. This was not the passionate desire she felt for Ares, nor the maternal affection she bore for her son Eros. This was something entirely new, a love that combined protectiveness with attraction, tenderness with longing. She took the infant Adonis to her sacred island, raising him in gardens where every flower bloomed in perpetual spring and every breeze carried the scent of roses and jasmine. As Adonis grew, his beauty became legendary even among the gods. His hair was like spun gold, touched by sunlight. His eyes held the depth of forest pools, and his smile could make flowers bloom out of season. But it was not just his physical perfection that captivated all who saw him. There was something in his nature that spoke of wild freedom, an untamed spirit that no amount of divine protection could fully contain. When Adonis reached manhood, his greatest passion was not for love or luxury, but for the hunt. Despite Aphrodite's pleas and warnings, he would disappear into the forests for days at a time, tracking wild boar and deer through terrain that would challenge even the most experienced hunters. The goddess lived in constant fear for his safety, knowing that mortal beauty, no matter how perfect, was still housed in mortal flesh that could be torn and broken. Her fears were not unfounded, for Ares had been watching their love affair with growing jealousy. The god of war had never forgotten his passion for Aphrodite, and seeing her devotion to a mortal youth filled him with a rage that burned hotter than any battlefield. He began to plot a revenge that would remove his rival while appearing to be nothing more than a hunting accident. Ares sent a massive wild boar, larger and more ferocious than any natural animal, to the forests where Adonis hunted. The creature was a monster of divine creation, with tusks like curved swords and eyes that burned with supernatural malice. When Adonis encountered it in a secluded grove, he saw only another challenge to his hunting skills, not recognizing the divine trap that had been set for him. The battle was brief but terrible. Adonis's spear found its mark, but the wound only enraged the beast further. Its tusks found his thigh, opening an artery that painted the forest floor with crimson that seemed too bright, too red to be merely mortal blood. As his life flowed away, Adonis called out for Aphrodite, and the goddess heard his voice across the dimensions that separated them. She arrived to find him dying in a grove that had been transformed by his blood. Where each drop had fallen, red anemone flowers were already beginning to bloom, their petals the exact shade of his life force. Aphrodite gathered him in her arms, her tears mixing with his blood to water the flowers that would forever after bear his name. "Your beauty will not be forgotten," she whispered as his eyes grew dim. "Each year, when these flowers bloom, the world will remember the love we shared. And each year, when they fade, they will mourn with me for what was lost too soon." Echo and Narcissus, reflections and repetitions. In the mountains of Boeotia, where echoes dance between ancient rocks and sunlight filters through leaves like scattered gold coins, two souls were about to discover that love can be both reflection and prison, both gift and curse. The story begins with Echo, a mountain nymph whose voice was so beautiful that even the gods would pause in their celestial duties to listen when she spoke or sang. Echo possessed a gift that was also her weakness. She loved to talk. Her conversations could last for hours, filled with stories and observations, jokes and philosophical musings that entertained all who heard them. But this love of speech would prove to be her downfall, for it attracted the attention of Hera, who had grown suspicious of her husband's frequent absences from Olympus. The queen of the gods had begun to notice that whenever she went searching for Zeus during his earthly adventures, she would encounter Echo, who would engage her in such lengthy fascinating conversations that, by the time they ended, Zeus had vanished without a trace. It took Hera some time to realize that the nymph was deliberately distracting her, giving the unfaithful god time to escape detection and return to Olympus, as if he had never left. When Hera finally understood the deception, her punishment was swift and precisely crafted to fit the crime. "Since you love to talk so much," the goddess declared, "and since you have used that gift to deceive me, you will never again be able to speak first or hold a conversation. You will only be able to repeat the last words spoken by others, and even then, only the final syllables will be yours to voice." The curse transformed Echo's existence completely. Where once she had been the center of every social gathering, delighting friends with her wit and wisdom, she now found herself isolated and alone. She could no longer initiate conversations, could not ask questions or offer comfort, could not even say goodbye properly to those she loved. Her beautiful voice became a mere reflection of others' words, a hollow repetition that mocked her former eloquence. Lonely and heartbroken, Echo retreated to the deepest parts of the mountains, where she could hide her shame and avoid the pitying looks of those who had once enjoyed her company. It was there, in a secluded valley, where wildflowers grew in untended profusion, that she first saw Narcissus and felt her cursed heart stir with a love that would prove even more tormenting than her punishment. Narcissus was 16 years old, the son of the river god Cephissus and the nymph Liriapa. From the moment of his birth, it had been prophesied that he would live a long life, but only if he never came to know himself. His beauty was so extraordinary that it seemed almost supernatural, as if the gods had decided to create the perfect example of youthful male beauty, and had poured all their artistic skill into his creation. His hair caught sunlight like spun gold. His eyes were the color of deep forest pools, and his features were so perfectly proportioned that sculptors would weep with frustration, knowing they could never capture such perfection in marble. But his beauty came with a price. It was matched by an arrogance and coldness that made him reject every advance. Every declaration of love, every attempt at friendship or romance. When Echo saw him hunting in her valley, she felt something she had never experienced before. This was not mere attraction, but a love so complete and overwhelming that it consumed every other thought. She began to follow him through the forest, staying hidden among the trees, content just to watch him move with the grace of a young deer, to hear his voice even when she could not respond with her own words. The day finally came when Narcissus became separated from his hunting companions and found himself lost in the deep woods. "Is anyone there?" he called out, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty that Echo had never heard before. Here was her chance, the moment she had been waiting for. But her curse meant she could only respond with his own words. "There," she called back, her voice carrying all the longing she could not express directly. Narcissus looked around, confused. "Come to me," he called. "To me," Echo replied, and unable to contain herself any longer. She stepped out from behind the trees and ran toward him with arms outstretched, her face radiant with hope and love. But Narcissus recoiled in disgust. "Do not touch me," he said coldly. "I would rather die than let you have me." "Have me," Echo whispered. But he was already walking away, leaving her alone with words that had become a mockery of her feelings. Heartbroken and humiliated, Echo retreated deeper into the mountains than ever before. Slowly, her body began to waste away until only her voice remained, a disembodied sound that would forever repeat the last words spoken in her presence. An eternal reminder of love, rejected, and words that could never be her own. Legacies of divine loves. And so, from the passions of the gods were born heroes and lineages, cities and constellations. Stories that would echo through the centuries like stars in the night sky. Each one a testament to love's power to create something eternal from moments of mortal beauty. The children of these divine unions carried within their blood both the glory and the burden of their celestial heritage, becoming bridges between the world of gods and the realm of humanity. Perseus, son of Zeus, and Danae grew to embody the courage that comes from being born of impossible love. The golden rain that had penetrated his mother's bronze prison had given him not just life, but a destiny that would shine across the ages, with winged sandals borrowed from Hermes and a shield polished to mirror brightness from Athena. He ventured into realms where mortal men feared to tread. When he faced the Gorgon Medusa, whose gaze could turn living flesh to stone, he saw her not directly, but as a reflection, understanding that sometimes truth must be approached indirectly through the wisdom that comes from divine parentage. His victory over the sea monster that threatened Andromeda was more than heroic rescue. It was love, recognizing love. The son of a god who had learned tenderness from his mortal mother, saving a princess whose beauty had attracted divine wrath. Their marriage produced a lineage of kings and heroes, each generation carrying forward the legacy of that first impossible love between sky god and imprisoned maiden. Aeneas walked a different path, bearing within his mortal frame the essence of love itself. For he was son to Aphrodite and the Trojan prince Anchises. When Troy fell in flames and ash, when the great city that had stood for 1,000 years crumbled beneath Greek spears, Aeneas carried more than just his father on his shoulders and his side. He bore the sacred mission given to him by his divine mother to find a new homeland where love and beauty could flourish again. His journey across the Mediterranean was guided by Aphrodite's invisible hand, leading him through storms and past the siren songs, through encounters with gods and monsters, until he reached the shores of Italy. There, his descendants would build a city that would become Rome, the eternal city whose empire would spread Aphrodite's gifts of art and poetry, law and civilization across the known world. Every Roman who ever spoke of love, every poet who ever praised beauty, carried within their words an echo of that first divine passion. The very heavens themselves became a gallery of these love stories, transformed into constellations that would guide sailors and inspire lovers for millennia to come. Callisto, the huntress who had been transformed into a bear by Hera's jealousy, found her eternal rest as Ursa Major, the great bear, forever circling the pole star with her son, Arcas, who became Ursa Minor. Their story played out nightly across the dome of sky, a reminder that even the cruelest transformations could become beautiful when viewed from the proper distance. Corona Borealis, the northern crown, sparkled with the memory of Ariadne's wedding diadem, thrown into the sky by Dionysus when he made her his bride. She who had been abandoned on the shores of Naxos by the ungrateful Theseus, found in the god of wine and ecstasy a love that transcended mortal understanding. Her crown became a circle of stars that would forever remind mortals that true love could transform abandonment into apotheosis, betrayal into divine marriage. The festivals that grew from these stories became the heartbeat of ancient civilization. The Adonia celebrated each year when the red anemones bloomed, saw women gathering on rooftops to plant quick-growing seeds in shallow pots, watching them sprout and wither in a matter of days, mourning the brief beauty of Aphrodite's beloved. Their tears were not just for Adonis, but for all love that burns bright and fades too soon, for all beauty that time cannot preserve. The Dionysia transformed entire cities into theaters of divine passion, where wine flowed like rivers and inhibitions dissolved like morning mist. These were not mere celebrations, but religious experiences, moments when mortals could touch the ecstasy that the gods knew in their loves. When the boundaries between human and divine became as permeable as the veil between waking and dreaming, artists and poets of every generation would return to these stories like pilgrims to sacred springs, finding in them inexhaustible sources of inspiration. Ovid would weave them into his Metamorphoses, showing how love's power to transform was the one constant in a world of endless change. Renaissance painters would discover in Aphrodite's birth, from sea foam the perfect symbol of beauty emerging from chaos. While sculptors would spend lifetimes trying to capture in marble the moment when Daphne's flesh became bark, when love and loss became one eternal gesture. Philosophical ending: the eternal nature of love in the eternal waters of time, where all stories eventually meet and mingle like streams flowing into an endless ocean. The loves of the gods continue to whisper truths about the human heart that transcend the boundaries of myth and reality. For in every mortal passion echoes something of the divine, and in every transformation we witness the eternal power of love to change not merely hearts, but the very fabric of reality itself. These ancient stories speak to us across millennia because they illuminate patterns that remain constant in the human experience. The jealousy of Hera mirrors every betrayed spouse who has ever plotted revenge. The transformation of Daphne into a laurel tree reflects every soul who has chosen freedom over surrender, solitude over possession. The endless pursuit of Echo speaks to all who have loved without hope of reciprocation, whose voices have become mere repetitions of another's words. Zeus's countless transformations reveal love's infinite creativity, its ability to find new forms and expressions when the old ones fail. Whether appearing as swan or bull, golden rain or gentle breeze, love adapts to whatever shape is necessary to reach the beloved. In our modern world, we see the same principle at work in every text message sent at midnight, every song written for someone who may never hear it, every gesture of affection that transcends the limitations of ordinary communication. The tragic beauty of Adonis and the Red Anemones reminds us that some loves are meant to be brief, burning bright as shooting stars before fading into memory. Yet their very brevity makes them precious, like flowers that bloom for only a day but leave seeds that will grow again when conditions are right. Every spring brings new anemones, just as every generation discovers love anew, thinking themselves the first to feel such intensity, such joy, such exquisite pain. Persephone's journey between the worlds of light and shadow speaks to love's power to create cycles, to establish rhythms that govern not just individual hearts, but entire civilizations. Her annual return from the underworld brings spring to the world, just as every reconciliation between lovers brings renewal to their shared existence. The seasons themselves become a metaphor for love's eternal dance between presence and absence, fulfillment and longing. In the modern world, these patterns continue to unfold in countless variations. The businessman who abandons his career to follow an artist to another continent echoes Paris abandoning Troy for Helen. The woman who transforms her entire life for love, mirrors every mortal who caught a god's attention and found herself changed forever. The couple who meet in a crowded room and feel the world shift around them experience the same recognition that sparked between Aphrodite and Ares in Hephaestus's forge. Technology may have changed the methods, but not the essence. Where once Zeus sent golden rain through bronze walls, lovers now send messages across digital barriers. Where Orpheus played his lyre to move stones and trees, modern lovers create playlists that capture the exact emotional frequency of their feelings. The medium evolves, but the message remains eternal. Love finds a way. The god stories also remind us that love's transformations are not always comfortable or convenient. Io's wandering as a cow, Callisto's exile as a bear, Daphne's rooting as a tree, all speak to love's power to change us in ways we never expected or desired. Yet even these painful metamorphoses serve a purpose, teaching us that growth often requires the dissolution of our previous selves, that becoming who we are meant to be sometimes means letting go of who we thought we were. As these ancient voices fade into the gentle silence of winter night, they leave behind not endings, but beginnings. Every love story ever told is a variation on these eternal themes. Every heart that opens to another continues the work that Aphrodite began when she first rose from the sea foam. The gods may have retreated to the realm of myth, but their gifts remain active in the world. The capacity to see beauty, to feel desire, to risk transformation for the sake of connection. In the quiet moments before sleep, when the day's noise settles into stillness and the heart speaks its truest language, we can still hear them, these whispers of divine love that shaped the world. They remind us that we are all children of impossible unions, all carriers of celestial fire, all participants in the eternal story that began when the first god looked upon the first mortal and felt something stir that had never stirred before. And so the stories continue, written now, not in constellations, but in the countless small gestures of affection that illuminate ordinary days. Each kindness is a prayer to Aphrodite. Each act of courage in love's name honors the memory of Perseus. Each choice to remain faithful despite temptation pays tribute to the few who resisted the gods, advances and kept their hearts their own. The loves of the gods live on in every heart that dares to love, in every soul brave enough to be transformed. In every moment when two people look at each other and see not just what is, but what could be. In this way, the ancient stories never truly end. They simply find new voices, new forms, new ways to remind us that love in all its forms, remains the most powerful force in any universe, mortal or divine.